A man calls a black teen a thug mid-flight. Seconds later, a flight attendant makes a bold announcement. What happens next will leave you speechless. If you believe no black teen should be judged by his skin, hit that subscribe button right now. The hum of the aircraft cabin blended with the soft chime of boarding announcements, but for 13-year-old Jameer Robinson, it all felt surreal, like a scene from one of the flight simulators he had mastered at home. He adjusted the strap on his worn leather backpack and sank deeper into the wide leather seat of 14C, his fingers tracing the edge of a book titled The Sky Is No Limit, a guide for young aviators. Though the seat was spacious and polished, Jameer felt small in it. This wasn't just his first time flying alone. It was his first time flying first class. He was headed to Washington, D.C., to attend the National Youth Aviation Summit, the youngest student ever selected. His father, a retired Air Force pilot, had hugged him tightly before security and whispered, "Fly high, Jam. You've earned this." Those words still echoed in his ears. Dressed in a clean white polo shirt, dark jeans, and sneakers so new they barely creased, Jameer looked every bit the polished young scholar he was. But as passengers filed in, some gave him strange glances, as though they were confused about how a kid like him ended up in a seat like this. He tried to brush it off and focused on the diagram of a Boeing 747's thrust system. Then, as the clock crept closer to departure, the seat beside him was claimed by a tall, older man in a gray tailored suit. The man, Wallace Green, heaved a dramatic sigh as he stuffed his leather briefcase into the overhead compartment, then turned and gave Jameer a slow, scrutinizing look. His eyes moved from Jameer's face to his backpack, to the book in his lap, and finally down to his shoes. Jameer offered a polite smile. "Hello, sir." Wallace didn't reply. He simply sat down, adjusted his cuffs, and pulled out a business journal. As the engines began their slow whir of warm-up, Wallace muttered under his breath, just loud enough to be heard, "Thugs in first class now, huh?" Jameer's eyes widened. For a second, he thought maybe he had misunderstood. But the tone, the timing, it was deliberate. His stomach tightened. He wanted to say something, to defend himself, to explain that he'd won a scholarship, that he loved aviation, that he wasn't what this man thought. But he stayed quiet, swallowing the sharp knot in his throat. He'd been taught to stay respectful, to stay calm. What neither of them noticed was the figure standing just a few rows behind, watching closely. Marcus Hill, a senior flight attendant with calm eyes and an observant mind, had been preparing the front galley when he heard the comment. At first, he thought it was his imagination. But when he glanced toward seat 14C and saw Jameer's hunched shoulders, the truth became clear. Marcus had seen enough in his years of service, enough sideways glances, enough snide remarks veiled behind sarcasm. He knew what that tone meant, and he also knew he wasn't going to let it slide. With practiced grace, Marcus approached the row and leaned in slightly toward Wallace. "Is everything okay here, gentlemen?" he asked, his voice light but steady. Wallace waved him off with a condescending grin. "All good. Just enjoying the company." Marcus smiled faintly. "Glad to hear it." He turned slightly toward Jameer. "Would you like a juice or water before we take off?" Jameer looked up, surprised by the kindness. "Water, please." "Thank you. Only people who stand for respect and truth subscribe. Prove where you stand." As Marcus walked away, Wallace scoffed under his breath again. Probably here on some handout program. The words weren't loud, but Marcus had sharp ears. He didn't show a reaction, but inside, something shifted. He stepped into the galley, picked up the intercom handset, and stared out at the cabin. He took a breath. The rules were clear, no political statements, no personal remarks. But honoring a young passenger? That wasn't just allowed. It was encouraged. And so he made a decision. "Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen," Marcus began, his voice echoing through the speakers overhead. Passengers paused their conversations and looked up. "Before we begin the safety demonstration, I'd like to take a moment to recognize a very special guest on board with us today. Seat 14C, Mr. Jameer Robinson." Heads turned. Jameer froze, his water still untouched on the tray. Jameer has just been awarded a national scholarship for youth in aviation, Marcus continued, smiling now. Out of thousands of applicants from across the country, he ranked #1. He's flying to represent our state at a prestigious summit in Washington, D.C. He's 13, and he's brilliant. The cabin erupted in applause. Jameer's face flushed with disbelief. A woman across the aisle leaned over and said, "That's amazing, young man." A businessman 2 rows ahead gave him a thumbs up. Wallace sat stiffly, flipping his magazine page with unnecessary force. He didn't look up, but Marcus wasn't finished. He lowered his voice just slightly, the emotion threading through each word. Sometimes, greatness doesn't wear a suit. Sometimes, it wears a backpack and carries dreams too big to measure. He paused. So let's fly safe, and let's fly proud. The applause renewed, louder this time. Jameer looked up at Marcus, his eyes glassy, but his smile steady. For the first time since boarding, he felt like he belonged, not just in that seat, but in that moment, in the sky, in the future he'd been working toward. Marcus returned to the galley as if nothing had happened. But as he passed Wallace, he didn't need to look at him. The silence spoke for itself. Wallace's mouth was tight, his fingers drumming angrily on the armrest. But the power had... Disclaimer. The story you've just watched is fictional, created to highlight issues of racial discrimination and the importance of standing up against injustice. Its purpose is to raise awareness, promote empathy, and encourage meaningful discussions about respect, equality, and accountability in all environments.